I got in the car at 4:30. 4:30! Oh my God, I was thinking about moving to the suburbs now. I'm considering it.
Maybe on a Sunday morning.
Take the train. Take the train.
I should have taken the train, I know.
Oh, that's not big on her, she's here.
I wasn't thinking. I passed it off to other people. They did. I'm gonna fire them.
Hey, I'm Janet Torsney. I'm the assistant director of the library. Usually Peter Coyle, the director, does this, but a staff member of ours is getting an award at the Thurgood Marshall dinner tonight from the NAACP. In the children's department, so we're so happy. That's why tonight, as you can see, we have Katy Tur, MSNBC correspondent and intrepid traveler, and news producer Tom Johnson. They're going to be chatting in this format. I'm sure you're familiar with this. Started in 2015. It's such a wonderful way to bring our community together with really remarkable people. They're going to be introduced by Jennifer. I'm just here hanging out, introducing her. But Jennifer Adore is one of our Library Foundation trustees. She's worked so hard at that, and she's the co-founder of the Open Book, Open Mind series, and has brought so much talent and hard work and generosity and fabulous ideas, and we're just so grateful to you, Jen. Thank you very much. We have one more Open Book, Open Mind this year. It's going to be Isabel Allende and Christina Baker-Klein at Buzz Aldrin or Mount Hebron, depending on how old you are. It's going to be on November 8th. You can get tickets on our website. Please come. I want to let you know who our supporters are. The whole Open Book, Open Mind series is, I'm going to read this so I don't miss it, is supported by Susan and Tom Dunn, the Montclair Foundation, and Investors Foundation. And this particular event was sponsored by Pollock Financial Group. Thank you all for that. And their support is not only for the series, but keeps the series free. So it's a really wonderful kind of generosity. We're very grateful. Now I get to act like a librarian. Please turn off your devices. Nobody wants to be that person, right? There will be questions, but it will be at the end of the conversation, so hold back. And after the questions, the books will be sold in the back by our good friends from Watch On Bookseller. Thank you, Margot, for always being here. And now, Jennifer Durr, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's go.
Try and be quick, because nobody really wants to hear from me anyway. So, thank you all for coming to this event this evening. And I just want to say a special thanks to my co-founder, David Jones, who's in the audience tonight. He helped Senator John McCain recently said we need a free and adversarial press to preserve democracy. Despite being the object of Trump's public vitriol before and after he was elected president, it's hard for me to say that. Katy Tur has never shied away from being that adversarial, challenging member of the press, bent on bringing the public the truth that informs democracy. As most of you already know, Ms. Tur was embedded with the Trump campaign as an NBC reporter. During this time, she became accustomed to taunts and threats from Trump supporters. The reporter's fans were moved to make a public show of solidarity, posting support on social media along with the hashtag #OnWithTur. The Washington Post has said of Ms. Tur's best-selling new memoir, Unbelievable, My Front Row Seat to the Craziest Campaign in American History. What elevates this book, beyond one more pedestrian campaign memoir, is Tur's skill at capturing the constant indignities of campaign reporting while female, including the worst indignity of all, enduring the fixation of Trump himself. Katy Tur was the recipient of a 2017 Walter Cronkite Award for Excellence in Journalism. She is currently a correspondent for NBC News and an anchor for MSNBC. We thank her not only for being here tonight, but also for her chutzpah. I lied, I said I'd be fast, but I'm not. Joining Katy in conversation is another fearless political journalist, Montclair's own Tom Johnson, an award-winning news executive. Tom was kind enough to moderate our January Open Book Facebook discussion with other journalists about what to expect from President Trump's first 100 days. His most recent work includes Showtime's weekly documentary series, The Circus, Inside the Biggest Story on Earth. Previously, Tom was executive editor of Bloomberg Politics and executive producer of the nightly politics program With All Due Respect. He spent 2 decades at ABC News, where his work earned a Peabody, Emmy, DuPont, and Edward R. Murrow Award. Did I miss any of your words? We are so honored to have both of you here tonight. Just give me one moment, one last sentence, and that is, I have to nudge you all, please buy the book. These people donate their time. They get paid very high sums to speak, and they donate their time here because this is a public library, and we need to buy their books to keep them coming, so please do that.
Wow. We'll get right into it. Take us back to the beginning of this whole odyssey. And I think it's kind of fun, maybe it's fun for folks to kind of learn about how a network decides who's going to cover it. And they hedge, and they say, it's our best political reporter. Let's put him on. Can you hear me in the back? Well, we'll project. You weren't on that list.
No.
You were across the ocean.
Yeah.
So talk about sort of how this came together, that you suddenly were on the hottest campaign.
You're right. So you have an idea of who's going to run for president at the very least a few months in advance. Most times you have an idea much longer than that. And you know who is in your political beat at your network. You know who's very good at politics, who's well-sourced with the Republicans, who's well-sourced with Democrats. If it's this senator, we know we can use this person from Capitol Hill. If it's Hillary Clinton, we know we have Andrea Mitchell, etc. And I was living in London. I had essentially just moved there to live there for 4 years as a foreign correspondent, my dream job. And I came back. I came back just to fulfill and make a wish from a lovely young boy. And to remind my bosses that I exist, because they tend to forget about you when you're overseas, which is both a blessing and a curse. And I was standing around the newsroom when Univision dropped Donald Trump. He had just announced. Univision dropped him. Macy's dropped him. NBC dropped his pageant. And Nightly News needed somebody to cover it. And they said, well, who's around? And one of my friends in the newsroom said, oh, Katy Tur, she's here, she's just standing around. And I was just standing around, and that's how this all began. Nobody expected Donald Trump was going to be somebody worth following. And nobody expected to ever put me on politics. But it benefited the network because I was a complete outsider. And Donald Trump was a complete outsider. So I was able to empathize with his voters and look at him in I think, a more honest way and assess his support in a more honest way than somebody who had been living and breathing Washington, because I didn't have any of the preconceived notions, the baggage that would come along with that.
So you're 2 outsiders, and then suddenly you're at a rally or somewhere in New Hampshire. Literally the first day you're assigned to cover him. You're there, you're taking notes, he's making remarks. He calls you out right there and then. What do you think that was about? Do you think
I just remember thinking,
knew your work? Like what?
I remember thinking, what the heck is going on? I had driven up to New Hampshire. This is June 30th of 2015. Donald Trump was holding a rally around a backyard pool. It was a couple hundred people. It was nothing like what we came to see toward the end of the campaign. And it's me and a few other local reporters mostly. And Donald Trump is trying out what would become his greatest campaign hits. He was talking about building a wall. He was defending his comments about Mexicans. He was saying how he gets more standing ovations than anybody. And he said that so many times. And then he was calling out the press, calling us liars and saying we're terrible. And he found me in the crowd and said, Katy, you haven't even looked up at me once. To use me as an example of why the press was so terrible. He did it with a smirk. I remember thinking, okay, whatever, I'm tweeting what you're saying. I yelled it back at him across the pool. And he was happy with that and told me that he thinks I do a good job, and then he moved on. I presume he knew who I was, either from local news in New York, or maybe he was an avid viewer of the Today Show, or maybe he had been watching Nightly News the past few nights. But he knew who I was, he knew my full name, he knew where I was standing in the crowd, and he knew that I was the NBC correspondent that was assigned to cover his campaign.
Yeah. I look back at that, actually, just right before you announced. Jeb Bush, Ben Carson, Mike Huckabee, Mark Rubio, Scott Walker, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, then perhaps Donald Trump.
A few more in there that you left out.
Like either 8th or 10th.
It was 16 candidates.
Yeah.
16.
What were your impressions of him when you arrived up there in New Hampshire to cover him?
I just thought he was, what everyone else thought, that he was a bit of a joke of a candidate. I didn't know what to expect with him. I didn't know how seriously to take him. There was no structure to his speech. There were no real pitches beyond, I'm going to build a wall, which nobody thought was feasible. And he was not backing down from anything that he was saying. So I didn't really know what to make of him. I remember standing there and thinking, Nightly News is not taking me tonight. Today Show doesn't want me tomorrow morning. I was supposed to have a Sicilian vacation with the French boyfriend I used to have in London a week ahead of then, and I hadn't yet told him that they wanted me to cover this full time. And I remember thinking, did I just make the dumbest mistake of my life? Quickly I realized that it was not a mistake to cover him. One of my bosses sat me down and said, you need to just figure out everything you can about Donald Trump, because he might not be going anywhere. Find out how he ticks, talk to everybody that he knows, call his real estate associates in New York, find out his political advisors, there's a few of them that have been running around New York. Just see what you can learn about him to try and understand why he will be appealing.
Yeah. I remember being in the newsroom for the first interview you did with him. I think it was in Trump Tower. It was a kind of whoa-up moment because you started to clash with him.
Yeah.
I was very interested in reading the book where you weren't really aware that was how he was taking it. You're challenging him on, immigration and, crime rates between immigrants versus, American-born people. He's steaming a little bit, and then he lashes into you, calls you naive. Take us to that moment. What do you think he was up to? Was he trying to just intimidate you back? Talk about sort of that dynamic.
You have to remember, this was Donald Trump in 2015. What did you know about Donald Trump in 2015? He was famous for being the host of The Apprentice, for firing people and fighting with people across a boardroom table. I presumed that he would go after me because that is who Donald Trump is. It is part of his shtick. That is the character of Donald Trump. I knew he would do it. Also, I'm NBC, and NBC just dropped his pageant. He's angry at us. So I went in well armed with all sorts of research to back me up. Pew research, nonpartisan research that flew in the face of what he was saying about immigration and crime. And I think he expected the interview to be much more of a softball because who the heck is Katy Tur? She's not a political correspondent. She's 5'2". I don't know. She's little. And I think when he realized that it wasn't going to be that way, he got angry. But in the moment, I just remember thinking, of course he's going to be angry. And so you can see in the video, and it's fun to go back and watch it because I'm smiling the entire time. I have this just kind of amused smile on my face, like what is that? What's going on? And so when it's over, I stand up to shake his hand, and he's livid, and he starts screaming at me, "You are going to deceptively edit that interview." I said, "What are you talking about? You better air it in full. We have cameras in here, and we will air it if you don't air it." I'm looking up, there's no cameras. How do you get the audio? And then he starts really just railing into me. He says, "You could never be president." Last I checked, you were the one running for president, not me. You stumbled 3 times. I don't care. But he walked away. His campaign manager came down. I didn't even know who the guy was in the beginning because he just didn't. He seemed so out of place. And my camera crews, these longtime vets of NBC News, who have interviewed Donald Trump multiple times in the past, I mean, their jaws were on the floor. I cannot believe he spoke to you that way. He was really upset. And I remember thinking, oh my God, what did I do? Did I do something wrong? Was I inappropriate? Did I not give him the due respect? I just didn't know. I didn't know until I walked into NBC, sat down on set, and watched the interview air for the first time on television, sitting next to Chuck Todd and looking at his face, and then looking at Trump's face and seeing how angry he was.
Yeah, you wrote, I've been on TV for 9 years, but no one knows who I am.
No one knew who I was.
Until that moment.
No one knew who I mean, no one knew who I was. Which was fine.
Yeah, it's fine. There was a very, very dark sort of period after the San Bernardino shootings and building into this large sort of Trump provocative announcement about banning Muslims from this country. He would clarify later that he wanted to review or make sure the nation reviewed its vetting process. You write about that in the book. I thought the whole story was very telling on a lot of different levels. Take us to the moment where you're reading his proposed announcement. When his announcement hits your Twitter feed or hits your email, I love just like 3 minutes later or seconds later, I can't remember what it was in the book, Kate Snow, you're going to do a phone or you're going to go live.
I'm going to blame that on Izzy Povich. She's sitting in the audience. She was the head of daytime programming at NBC.
It speaks to just the absolute utter speed by which you, a field reporter covering a campaign, is called on to sort of provide analysis. Is this legal? Why is he doing it? What do your sources say?
And just
literally, I'm just reading it.
So cable news, that's the way we work. I mean, we are up to the minute. So when something happens, we start talking about it, and that's why you have to bear with us as something is developing. We are learning about it alongside you. And this was one of those scenarios. So this unexplainable announcement hits our inbox without any warning whatsoever. I, Donald J. Trump, am going to ban all
Well,
Muslims.
we weren't sure it was a hoax.
Well, yeah, and so I tweeted an image of it,
Yeah.
and a bunch of people on Twitter were like, "This is a joke."
Right.
And they genuinely thought it was a joke. It couldn't possibly be real because it was so far out there. But Donald Trump at the time, and this is how you put it into context, even though you don't know anything about it, you don't know how your sources are going to react, you don't know if it's legal. You do a Google search and you see what you can find, and I found the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, which is the closest anything that I could find in that moment that it came to. And that was China, it wasn't a religion. And also, if you do religious testing, how in the world does this work? And the campaign didn't know at the time if that included Muslims who happened to be overseas when they made the announcement. Does that include Muslim athletes who are playing a game overseas? Does that include Muslim Americans who are serving in our military overseas? Initially, they said yes, everybody. Doesn't matter. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, no, you're out. So I got on the air and I put it into context, and the context was San Bernardino had just happened. The couple who murdered a bunch of people inside that office party. President Obama the day before gave an announcement on terror, which was the big story for that day that we had been covering. And so Donald Trump recaptures the news cycle by making this announcement. What he is trying to do is say, I will be the toughest on terror. He's faulting the administration for the vetting process, saying that President Obama is allowing terrorists into this country. They are in your neighborhoods right now. Your Muslim neighbors are hiding them. They're building bombs in their living rooms, and they won't tell you about it. These are basically things that he said. And the media is essentially complicit in this because we're not reporting on it. We're not telling you that the Obama administration is weak on borders. We're not telling you about these Muslims who are creating havoc just behind the scenes in all of these American neighborhoods. So people are angry, they are scared. The majority of Republican voters, we had just done a poll, the majority of thank God, Republican voters had said that their biggest fear was to be the victim of a terrorist attack. So I say all this on the air. And you try to just talk for as long as you can talk, because poor Kate's now is in the same boat as I am, and we're just kind of feeling our way around, and I'm on my phone, and I'm texting sources, I'm texting people at the RNC, saying, what do you think of this? And they're like, it's a joke, he's never gonna make it, everyone has to denounce him now, and people are coming out and they're saying that this is completely appalling, and Ted Cruz is saying it's appalling, and Jeb Bush is saying it's appalling, and the Democrats are obviously going nuts. And so you're trying to corral all that information, get it on the air, and then also go and interview people who are standing in line for this rally. Thousands of people.
And what were you finding from that?
Nobody minded. The strongest anti-reaction that we got was, I have to think about it. The rest were some variants of, this is great, he's trying to keep us safe, or we need to send all Muslims back who are currently in the United States. It is offensive. We've interviewed one, it was an Iraq or an Afghanistan war veteran, who said, if Muslims stay in this country, it is an affront to all of the people that I served with. Yeah.
Right.
So the crowd is angry, and they're scared. They're whipped up. And Donald Trump takes the stage, and he is building up to the announcement of the Muslim ban. And before he gets to that, he goes on a riff about how terrible the press is. And he was currently angry about a few tweets that I sent out, talking about how he had left the stage abruptly a few days before at another rally. And he pulls out a story from Gateway Pundit, which is, if you're not familiar with it, it is less honest than Breitbart. Yeah. And so he pulls it out and he says, Gateway Pundit did a great story, what a great organization about a lying scum press. And she's back there, little Katy, she's back there, what a lie it was. The crowd has no idea what he's talking about, what he's referencing. He's just going on about what a terrible, dishonest liar I was. Third rate, and I'm back there, and I'm already.
You're in this pen.
Or you're in a pen, if you saw us at Trump rallies, or if any of you went to a Trump rally, that guy. He left. Anyway, so we're penned in by bicycle racks, and that's not uncommon for campaigns to do that.
Usually in the back.
It's an area for the press to put down their stuff. It's a space where you can do your work, where people aren't allowed to go in and show the press. The difference with the Trump campaign is we weren't allowed to leave the press bank for some reason. We couldn't figure out if it was for our protection or their protection. And so I'm already at this point sitting on the riser, because I just felt like I was tired, it was not a night to be exposed. Even before he called me out, because everyone was so angry, it just felt so heavy and dark in the room, and it's a cliche, but like a matchbox waiting for a light. And then he calls me out, and I remember thinking, of course. And the whole place turns around and loses me all at once, and calling me names, people are standing on their chairs. And I smiled and I waved. Because what else are you supposed to do in that situation? And I hoped it would diffuse.
Has someone told you to do that, or you just sort of been
No,
that?
I don't know. I just decided that would be the best way.
Yeah, that's good.
Hi. I didn't want people to think that I was scared or intimidated.
Yeah.
It's worse.
Yeah. So they're all staring at you, trying to figure out who's Katy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When the event ends, you get a tip that you're supposed to come over here and walk out with the Secret Service at that point. So were you scared, or were you dazed a little bit by this, or what was going through your mind?
I didn't have the time to be nervous in the moment because I had my job to do still. He had announced the Muslim ban, so I was waiting for that. And then I had to do a hit for Chris Matthews and then Chris Hayes. And once that was over and I had a real chance to look at my phone and saw that my mom was freaking out, and saw my bosses were freaking out, and saw Twitter was freaking out, I realized that it was a really heavy situation. And there were still stragglers of people in the rally. This was in the belly of a warship. it's like really, it's really loud, it's an iron hull, and the sound ricochets off it, and we're all surrounded on all sides by Trump reporters, Trump supporters. And so there were, as people were flooding out, people straggled, waited behind to try to, I don't know, say whatever they couldn't say to me. And one of Trump's staffers comes up and shoos them away and pulls my producer and I to the side and says, these guys are gonna walk you out. And it was 2 Secret Service agents. And I remember thinking in that moment, thank God they're here and walking me to my car, which is 500 yards away down a pitch black gangway, I don't know, down back to shore. And thinking, oh my gosh, I'm a target. I was getting death threats on my phone. Even still, I mean, it's you compartmentalize. You don't try to think about it, but even still, I get nervous, and sometimes in crowds. I get a little uncomfortable sometimes in crowds, which is awful. I'm an American journalist who covered a political campaign. I'm not in Mosul. I'm not in Turkey. I'm not a political journalist in Turkey where they're trying to crack down on the press. This is a political campaign, and reporters are nervous about their safety. A friend of mine, and it's opened the floodgates. A friend of mine at The Guardian was body slammed. You remember this, by a congressman. He wasn't a congressman, and then he got elected congressman after the body slam. You could argue the votes were already cast for that, but still, he's going to be an American congressman, and he body slammed a reporter. There was another instance when somebody was trying to question Jeff Sessions in West Virginia. They were roughed up by the local cops. No, sorry. Thought someone was correcting me live, which I appreciate. It's depressing. It's appalling.
What is it, I mean, you've studied Trump now for, I don't know, 700 days or whatever it is. You were on it for 510 days in the campaign. What is he, it almost seems like he feels he has a fingertip feel for something, and he drives at it. And sometimes he lands and he nails something. I mean, the voices of the people that your crew talked to at that event thought the ban was a great idea.
Yeah.
Back in New York, they weren't even going to put you on TV. Like, you wrote about Andrew Mitchell was going to wrap the whole thing. And you say, you got to put me on. I'm hearing a different story. So, I mean, it's like a microcosm in a way. That one event and the people in the Beltway are trying to get their arms around it. But almost missing the story.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Hey, you walked out for a second. Yeah, no, that was the thing.
You were seeing it.
We were seeing it on the ground, and it was something that I would try to convey to the bosses every day. I felt like that Simpsons meme, old man yells at cloud, because I was constantly saying, what you are saying in Washington, what you are saying in New York, is not what people are saying out on the road. And it's not just Trump rallies where thousands of people would show up, and they would be very enthusiastic and devoted to Donald Trump. It was cab drivers. Cab drivers of all colors and races. It was women on planes. It was the local firefighter that I just happened to get into a conversation with. It was a guy at a diner. I mean, it was more people than New York or Washington or Los Angeles or whatever city you want to name as the out-of-touch city really understood. And that was the perfect example of me kicking and screaming and saying, you need to put me on television in this situation.
I love how you went around and lobbied behind the scenes.
I'm notorious for my temper tantrum phone calls.
It's funny because I've been on the other end of that. It's hard to explain this, but like the car is racing down at 70 miles an hour, and it's helpful to have someone come to the outside and say, I just spoke to Katy, she's got great stuff. You guys should really consider that.
Yeah.
And we've already said, no Katy, we got Andrea.
And it's Andrea Mitchell.
Oh, it's Andrea Mitchell. So I was like, we got this wrapped up.
Yeah.
And then have someone come over and say, guys, wake up, like, you talk to Katy. And it's like, great, Andrea and Katy, so I like that kind of behind the scenes move. Talk a little bit about just the sheer brutality of covering this campaign. And I think, you know, I think people here would probably have a sense of it from just seeing you on television, like early in the morning, late at night. But just talk about what that does to your body, to your mental state.
Yeah,
everything.
it's grueling. So I was on the road for 510 days. I didn't have a home my home was in London. My clothes and my life and my milk, which had been rotting in the fridge, was in London. And then suddenly, in December, after I'd been on the road for about 6 months, I got a call saying, we need you to move out of London. So suddenly I just didn't have a home, period. All my stuff went into a storage unit somewhere, I don't know where. And I was, you amass a wardrobe on the road, you pick up little things here and there. Every morning you're getting up at 5 or 6 a.m. and you are rushing out the hotel door in some town, you can't even remember where you are. I would get in the shower sometimes and stand there and think, where am I? And it would take me a couple minutes. I think, where am I? Finally, I'd remember. And then I'd get on the road and I'd look around, the highways all look the same, and I'm like, wait, where am I again? And you go to the airport, you get on a flight at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m. You invariably have a connection somewhere because you're not generally going to major cities. You get off the plane, you have 1,000 emails that you have to parse through. Donald Trump has tweeted something that you have to suddenly learn and explain, and you've got to call your sources, and you've got to write a nightly news script, and oh my God, I'd really like some lunch. Is there somewhere to get lunch on the road? Is there a Panera Bread? Please tell me there's a Panera Bread. Oh no, there's just a gas station. Fine, I'll get some peanut butter packets. And then you go to a Trump rally, and you stand there outside, and you are live on television every hour, on the hour, until the end of time. I mean, it's like a wheel of death. And then Trump takes the stage. And suddenly they play the music at 95 decibels, and it's the same 5 songs. It is Tiny Dancer.
Do you shiver when you hear a Tiny Dancer now? Like, what is he?
I gotta tell you, I haven't heard it in a while, thank God. Although Hugh Hewitt, God bless him, when I had me on to talk about the book, and the intro to me was Tiny Dancer. That's an epic trolling Hugh. That one was grueling, but at the end of it, they started playing Backstreet Boys, and I was like, I just had enough. So they would play music at 95 decibels. I swear it was a form of torture for the press. I think he was doing it on purpose. And then Trump would take the stage. He usually was a little bit late, and then he would talk for 45 minutes to an hour and a half. And then I would do a hit for. If Rachel wanted me, great. If Chris Hayes wanted me, if Lawrence, God forbid Lawrence or Brian Williams wanted me, because those were so late at night. And then we would drive back to the hotel, and if something was open for dinner, awesome. If it wasn't, usually it wasn't open, I'd have more peanut butter packets. And I would get to my room, and I would, you're shaken at this point. You try to turn your mind off, and I'd watch cartoons. I really like South Park. And you go to sleep, and you do the whole thing over again tomorrow. I mean, every single day. It's just I didn't sleep. I don't know how I functioned. I did not sleep for a year and a half. Now I struggle to get out of bed at 8 a.m., which is sad.
Yeah. But you are, in fact, the conduit between the campaign and NBC News. You are the person, you are the explainer of everything that Trump was meandering through, all the minefields. But you talk about access journalism.
Yeah. And
you say access journalism, that you came to learn that that's not real journalism.
No.
Explain what access journalism is, explain sort of the dangers of it, and feeling constricted to say, what you want to say.
There's a place for access journalism, because access journalism does get you information. It's just, it can be really dangerous when everybody is trying to get the same amount of access. It's nice, it's comfortable, and it's safe to be the person who can get a comment constantly from the campaign, who gets told of a hire they might make soon, or you get told how much money they've raised. These incremental things that you need just to build a profile of any story. Or, the candidate will sit down with you more than other people because he knows he's going to get fair treatment, or not fair, nice treatment out of you. But it's barely journalism. I mean, it's PR more than anything else. And ultimately, when you're on a campaign, everyone's going to find out the information at some point. You're going to find out who the hire is. You're going to find out how much money they raise. That's public information. You're gonna find out what the schedule is. If he gives an interview to somebody else, you'll be able to parse through it because we all get it after you air it. The more valuable journalism, I think, is the journalism of contextualizing the person, shedding light on their personality, on their decision-making process. Who do they trust? Who do they rely on? But then also being tough. When you need to be tough, fact-checking them. Calling a lie when you need to say that. Holding true to what the fourth estate is, which is we were created to hold power to account. Without journalists, it's propaganda. So I decided, like a lot of good journalists out there, decided that access journalism is just not the way to go. I don't care if the campaign's not going to call me. Doesn't matter. I don't need them. I don't care if Donald Trump's going to put me out in the crowd. It's okay.
You can tweet around the journalists now anyway. What?
Yeah, and it's not as if they were giving anybody any information that was so valuable. I mean, it's not like anybody was getting more than anyone else.
Yeah, it just becomes a race of time.
Yeah.
The first one to say this incremental thing.
Exactly.
When the Access Hollywood tape was released, did you think it was over?
For a second.
Yeah.
Well, I heard it in an office, 30 Rock, and I didn't know what it was. I thought it was an it was in an executive's office, and I have a guilty conscience, so I immediately thought that I did something wrong. And I get down there, and she says, "Hit play on my computer," and it's just a video of a bus and two voices, and immediately I recognized Donald Trump's voice, and he's talking, and I give this quizzical look to my boss, and she's like, "Keep listening." And I hear, I did try to, can I use the language? I did try to fuck her. She was married. She had big fake tits, and you can grab them by the pussy. They let you do anything because you're a star. Paraphrase. And I remember exclaiming in the middle of the executive's office, where all my bosses sit, "Oh my God, did Donald Trump just say you can grab him by the pussy?" Loud. And I thought, this is, if anything is going to be it, this is going to be it. Because the campaign went completely dark. Kellyanne Conway wasn't on television. She canceled her appearances. Reince Priebus was telling RNC staffers that to go with their conscience. If they needed to quit, he understood, because he was worried about the jobs that they would be able to get in the future. 50 former and current lawmakers either said Donald Trump should resign or should drop out of the race, or that they would not vote for them. Lawmakers were suddenly realizing that they knew a woman, and they were coming out and they were saying, I can't vote for him because of my daughters, and I would never let my daughters be spoken to that way. There are kids in the audience, I shouldn't have said that.
That's not why.
I'm sorry. And it felt like the moment that could break him. I didn't think he would drop out, because that's just not who Donald Trump is. You push him, and if the harder you push, the firmer he'll stand. But I did think that this could lose him the election. But that was quickly disputed.
Right. Yeah. So when did you start to think, whoa?
We knew that the real test would be the rallies.
Yeah.
First rally, he was going to the debate. What did he do at the debate? And he apologized, but didn't show real contrition. He dug his heels in and brought Bill Clinton's accusers and made this about, I said these things, but look what he did. And I guess it was brilliant
Change the show.
strategizing.
Focus over.
We knew it was coming, but still, he didn't have any problem doing it. And then we went to some rallies, and they were just as packed as ever, just as packed. Did women show up? Yes, tons of women showed up. One woman wore a shirt that said, "Donald Trump can grab me by my," and she points at the arrow that she painted pointing down. But it wasn't just that outrageous display. It was, I got in a cab drivers, with a woman. And she's a 40-something-year-old woman who lived in North Carolina. And I asked her, was she bothered by it? No, this is just the way men talk. Totally excused it. I said, okay, well, I guess if she's not bothered by it, she believes what Donald Trump is saying, that this is locker room talk. I was standing outside of a rally in Lakewood, Florida. I think it was Lakewood, Florida. There was a lone protester outside playing the tape just on a loop. Grab by leg. And I stopped a 50, 60-something-year-old woman walking into the rally in a flowery dress. And I asked her, what do you think of the tape? And she said, what are you talking about? I said, well, what do you think of the words? Oh, who hasn't said that? Yeah. And I said, well, I haven't said it. And she said, good for you. And I said, well, have you said it? And she said, of course I haven't. And she walked into the rally. So she was immediately forgiving, but at the same time, the idea of her saying it was abhorrent to her. The Donald Trump supporters, and you should never paint a Trump supporter with a broad brush. I think that's very dangerous. I also think it's unproductive. There were people, it's not a bunch of uneducated, this is what I hear from people. They're uneducated, or they're racist, or they're xenophobic, or they're hate-filled. It's not true. It's a lot of people who voted for President Obama. I mean, I'm not painting a broad brush either, but there are components of Trump's voters who voted for President Obama. A lot of women voted for Donald Trump. Educated people did vote for Donald Trump as well. And the unifying theme was this frustration with how government was going. And Congress was deadlocked. They didn't seem to be working for them. They voted for a president who promised hope and change, and some people didn't get that hope and change. They weren't unaware of Donald Trump's offenses or his crudeness, but they felt like, at the very least, this completely different candidate could change things, could throw a wrench into things, could give Congress the kick in the pants that it needed. And there was a belief that Donald Trump could utilize all of the skills that he said he acquired in the business world, that he was a billionaire who was unparalleled at deal making. He'd be able to use that in the White House. And a lot of them would say, I'd say, why do you believe that? And they'd say, well, I watched The Apprentice. But seriously, I watched The Apprentice. Donald Trump has spent decades cultivating this image of himself, selling himself to people, period, and to make deals, to reporters, to just regular folks. Jimmy Breslin was, and this is in the book, explained it really well back in 1989, when Donald Trump was on the verge of financial ruin from his bankruptcies. And everyone was saying, oh, this is the end of Donald Trump. And Breslin said, of course it's not the end of Donald Trump. He's going to call a bunch of reporters, and he'll create a razzle-dazzle. He'll tell them that Donald Trump is too big to fail, and they will buy into it. So this whole mythology of Donald Trump is too smart to ever fail will be created. And so he won't. And so he'll get another deal. That's part of his brilliance.
And Hillary's biggest unforced error, was it the deplorables comment?
I think the deplorables, absolutely. Deplorables. I think it was just,
And how did that express itself out of the campaign?
It enabled Trump and his supporters to have a real rallying cry. Oh, you think I'm deplorable? Screw you. I mean, it was, we went, the very first rally after the deplorables, people were wearing "I'm a deplorable" shirt. I mean, they just used it in all sorts of creative ways. And it really created an us versus them mentality. It girded this idea that it is us versus you, the liberal elite, you, Hillary Clinton, who has no real respect for Americans. I mean, it just confirmed what a lot of people wanted to believe about her. I mean, obviously Donald Trump didn't win the popular vote, so it's not all of America, but it was enough to get him into the Electoral College. He had enthusiasm that she didn't have. It was very true when he would come out and say, I can get thousands of people all by myself without a guitar, and Hillary Clinton would have to get Bon Jovi or Katy Perry or Lady Gaga. I mean, it's just the reality of what it was like on the ground.
Right, and you thought he was going to win. I mean, was there?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. And the Comey sort of re-entering the email, I can't remember how many days before the election was, you thought that was, for Hillary, that might have been it, right?
I mean, it was, again, confirming what people wanted to believe about her, that she was a liar. And it brought it back up again. I was talking to somebody in the Clinton campaign the other day, from the Clinton campaign the other day, and they were saying that, or he was saying that he was extraordinarily upset that Comey announced that he was going to reclose the investigation because it brought it up again. It would have been better just to let it go. And it gave Donald Trump an opportunity to say that, this is really ironic now, you can't vote for somebody who might be under federal investigation. Could be indicted. It felt like, even though he had lost momentum and he was facing all sorts of accusers, this was exactly what Republicans needed, who would come out and denounce him, to say, oh, no, I can't let Hillary Clinton become president.
So I just have one more question, then I think we'll open it up for everybody else. But what's next for you? Are you going to stay with politics? I love this line you said, I know I can't do another snowstorm. So that means no rip current pieces, no lottery pieces.
Although I was looking at the hurricane coverage, and I was
Yeah,
come on, get blown around.
But is this where you are now?
I think so. I mean, I think part of my life is I'm not really good at making plans, but it seems like this is where I'm going to be, at least for the foreseeable future. I still hang on to a dream of moving back to Europe, living the foreign correspondent lifestyle. But we'll see.
All right, let's
Okay, let
open
me
it
get
up
the mic.
for folks.
One sec.
Oh, yeah. Crap.
Okay, so please raise your hands if you'd like to ask a question. We're going to take probably for about 15 minutes.
What does the next candidate have to do to tap into that overlap of people who voted for Trump
I
and
think they
Obama?
need to sell the idea that they will be good for those people, that they will affect the change that will help them in their lives. Target not just working class voters, but minority voters, American voters. Have a message that cuts across boundaries. You can't just be an anti-Donald Trump candidate. That doesn't work. You have to stand for something. So, I'm not a political strategist, so I am sure there are others who have a better idea. But I do think Donald Trump's economic message worked. Or the fact that he was at least saying that he had an economic message.
Since it appears that he doesn't read things thoroughly, who's calling the shots?
He's calling the shots.
But he's coming up with all these things, his own original ideas. He knows what's in the Iran deal. He knows all the details of
He
the...
reads things enough to get a general sense of them. That's from what I know of my conversations with people who know him. He likes to read headlines that have his name in them. Who's calling the shots? I mean, I think he's got a group of advisors who are trying to steer him in what they believe is the right direction. That's H.R. McMaster, that's James Mattis, that is John Kelly, that Rex Tillerson, even though Rex Tillerson is on the outs, who are trying to help push him in a direction that they think is appropriate for the President of the United States. But ultimately, if he holds a position about something, he is going to, as we saw today when he decertified the Iran deal, he's going to stick to it regardless of what people are telling him. Mattis said publicly that he thinks it's a bad idea. So did the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford.
Thank you.
What an epic 3 days or 4 days.
Decertifying the Iran deal,
Healthcare.
just gutting Obamacare. What is the third thing?
Coal. Coal.
Yeah.
Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico. Holy cow, Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
They met the president who worked in
Interesting.
My turn. What's your gut as far as Trump's future? Do you agree with Steve Bannon, about his 30% chance of continuing?
Only, I think what Steve Bannon was saying there, because Donald Trump would never, I don't see him as somebody who would ever quit. That's just not in his personality. I think what Steve Bannon was trying to say was that if Trump doesn't get on board with what I'm doing, with trying to oust these Republicans who are not on board with Donald Trump, with my hand-picked candidates in Alabama or in New York, et cetera, then Democrats will regain the House and Democrats will impeach him.
What do you think?
I don't know what's going to happen.
You had a gut feeling about?
I honestly, truly do not have any clue. I mean, I think we're in a dangerous time. I mean, I think it's very possible and probable that Democrats, if they do regain the House, that they will introduce articles of impeachment. But will they have the Senate on their side? I don't know about that. I think it is what happens with Bob Mueller. That's a big, huge question. Does Bob Mueller come out and say they were messy, but nothing actually happened? Are people going to accept that as an answer? I mean, we've been talking about how Bob Mueller is this whatever you want to call him. Maybe a savior. You say he's a savior because you probably believe that he's going to come out and say that Donald Trump did something wrong. But what if he does not? What if he does not? Are you going to believe him then? That's my question. No, you're not. And that's the problem we are facing in this country right now. If Bob Mueller, who's supposed to be unimpeachable himself in his integrity, comes out and says, I don't think anything was wrong, there's a good portion of this public who are going to say bullshit. And they're going to be angry about it. And if Bob Mueller comes out and says something did happen, it was nefarious, and here's my evidence, there's a good portion of the country who will say bullshit. And where are we going to be? In the same place. So it's beyond Donald Trump as president. We as Americans have got to find a way to talk to each other once again, to compromise, to empathize, to work together. This is not going to be solved by Donald Trump not being president if you're a liberal. It's not going to be solved by Donald Trump being president if you're a Donald Trump supporter. I mean, we are at a crossroads, and it's imperative for Americans, for you guys, to figure out a way to get along with each other. Sorry, so fun. That's a weird.
Probably don't need this, but thanks. What's your biggest concern regarding the role of the press in the age of Trump?
That he is going to denigrate us so thoroughly that we won't have any credibility any longer. But here, I'll give you this. The people hated the press right before Watergate and during Watergate. They really liked the press after Watergate. Once Nixon resigned, they saw the value in a free press. I think that one of the silver linings of Donald Trump's attacks on the media and his unique approach to the White House is that people are paying attention again, and they're paying attention to journalism. They're subscribing to the New York Times and to the Washington Post. They're watching MSNBC and CNN and ABC and CBS and NBC News, and I think that that is very beneficial, and it's forcing us to do better journalism. But again, I mean, it goes back to this Mueller idea that I was just talking about. We can only do so much. It's incumbent upon the American people to try and find a way to bridge what seems like an ever-widening rift.
I'll make my way to the back.
Yeah, also gravity exists. How about we all decide, yes, we're
Good with that?
gonna be okay with gravity. Let's find a set of shared facts.
Hi, while you were on the road and covering the campaign, did you have any sense of what was going on with social media and the bots and the, no idea?
No one did. Somebody asked me that the other day. Could we have done more? Did we not? Were we aware of this Russia investigation? We weren't. I mean, we were all very curious about why Donald Trump was being so nice to Vladimir Putin. We believe that was because he had business opportunities there, and we believed Don Jr. when he told a real estate conference and said a disproportionate number of our investors are Russian. But he didn't release his taxes, and so we can only find out so much information. It raised a lot of flags for everybody when he asked Russia to essentially hack into Hillary Clinton's email, and that's what raised the eyebrows of the American intelligence community as well. But we didn't know until I think it was DHS and the DNI announced that they were concerned about Russia in a press release.
Can you imagine the fact-checking job of sussing out all those Facebook posts, fake articles, and who posted it, who paid for it?
I don't really care. Facebook's got a lot of money. They
No, I'm
can
saying
do it.
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it's tough, but you built the platform. You got to learn how to control it.
I just wondered if you could comment on the Democratic Party at the moment and who you think might be able to challenge Donald Trump in the
I have no idea. I asked every Democrat that I have on my air, who is the leader of the Democratic Party, and I never get an answer. And I asked that not to get as a gotcha question for a Democrat, but just who is the leader of the Democratic Party? Who are you guys looking to? I don't think they really know yet, and the ones that do have presidential aspirations are trying to lay low because anybody who comes out first this early on is just going to get, it's going to feel a lot of heat and get cut apart. We'll see.
You had so much experience with actual Trump supporters, and the campaign and now the presidency seems to have been, let's say, controlled by so much unreality. I'm wondering if you think that there are Trump supporters or many Trump supporters that will and are capable of assessing the actual outcomes of things that he does and changing their minds, or is it just?
I think yeah. I talked to, I've got a Rolodex of a few people that I keep in touch with who have questioned things and who are a bit appalled by what's going on. Others are not. So I don't think we're really going to know until, maybe we'll get an idea of it in 2018, but we won't really know until 2020. And when I'm back out on the road talking to people.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question about the press again from a different angle. I know he's antagonistic, but Les Moonves said that Trump was the best thing that ever happened to cable television and to the news, that you guys were making more money than ever. And it seemed to me that Trump got $500 million in free advertising from press coverage. So I say that to say, is in some way the press a Trump enabler? Yeah.
That's a good question. It's a fair question. I think that Donald Trump has brought a lot more eyes to the news, and that's partially because people find him appalling and they want to hear about what's going on, and they want to see people fact check him, or they find Trump to be a breath of fresh air and they want to hear more of him. listen, we covered Donald Trump because he was garnering a lot of enthusiasm. He got 20,000 people to show up for a rally in Mobile, Alabama in August of 2015. That's 6 months before any votes were cast, any primary votes were cast. That's also before we were airing Donald Trump nonstop. So we reacted to the amount of enthusiasm that was there. The fact is, Jeb Bush, Ted Cruz, Hillary Clinton, we're not getting the same amount of people to show up at rallies. You know who was? Bernie Sanders. And you know what? We didn't cover him. And I don't know why we didn't cover him. That's a huge mistake, personally. I think we in the media have a lot of soul searching to do, and I think there are hard conversations that need to be had about how we cover the next election. I don't think it's fair for people to say that the media got him elected. I also just don't think it's true. But we didn't cover Bernie Sanders, so we really did too.
Hi, how you doing? You said in your interview with Chuck Todd at the 92nd Street Y that you always get two sources, unless you have one extraordinary source. My mother in the 70s worked as a producer at ABC, and they never aired anything unless it was 3 sources. So my question is the speed of information in the information age, does that make that impossible?
No, I mean, sometimes it depends on the quality of the source, but sometimes we need 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sources on something. The story we just did on Rex Tillerson calling the president a moron, I think that had 6 or 7 sources in the room. It depends on the quality of the source, and we've gotten very strict about our vetting. Everybody, we get to a point where everybody has to say who their source is to one person to make sure that we're not doubling up. And if it's a very high-level source, we don't have reason to believe would be misleading us, then the rules can get relaxed. If it's more low-level sources, the rules get much tighter.
Katy, you definitely were the canary in the coal mine during the campaign. I watched the campaign intently. How do you explain the disconnect between the polling, what you're saying, the enthusiasm you're seeing? You're coming back to your colleagues, you're telling them, I think he can win, I think he can win. The reaction from like Chris, Rachel, perhaps high-level Clinton campaign staffers. I mean, what was the reaction? Because it seemed that the polling was off and everyone was caught off guard.
Trump polling, their internal polling said that they were going to lose as well. The polls are flawed, period. That being said, the polls weren't totally off. They were off just enough to have it so that he wins. But I think what turned out was we presumed that people who had a high degree of dislike for the president or found him to be distasteful or unfavorable, that's the word I was looking for, that didn't necessarily mean they weren't going to vote for him. That's true. They just, I mean, the unfavorability rating of Donald Trump didn't mean that they weren't going to cast a ballot for him. But that goes back to this idea that, hey, what do we have to lose? That people felt.
Do you believe that the Democratic establishment and all the grassroots Democrat groups are going to find a way to come together and work together?
I don't know. They're pretty divided. Talk about the Republicans being divided, the Democrats are pretty divided as well. I don't know.
Anybody else?
Thanks for coming, Katy. Welcome to the People's Republic of Montclair. Which is the context for my question. You mentioned the press after Watergate in '74, but the press was very different. It was 3 networks, major newspapers. It's very different now. And I'm curious, you know, I am an avid MSNBC watcher. And listener, viewer, thank you. Do you feel sometimes that, you know, you're preaching to a choir? I mean,
yeah, I
not
do.
Fox News. And so, and to your earlier plea for empathy and people coming together,
Right.
you know, I feel sometimes that, you know, I'm not going to watch Fox News. I don't have an interest in watching Fox News. So, you know, I feel that, you know.
Well, I'd like
how
to
do we
always
bridge
watch
that?
MSNBC, so
Yeah.
there's that. But you notice, there are times where I feel like I'm preaching to a choir. What's the point of screaming in a room where everyone else is screaming? But you'll notice that the talk I'm giving today is, I'm trying to push you guys to see beyond your preconceived notions of what happened in 2016 or who made what decision in 2016. I think that's important. I try to do that on my show, and when I get to fill in on Meet the Press Daily, where it's a little bit more politics focused, I try to push, when I have pollsters on, to find out why they believe what they believe, or other, long-standing House watchers, congressional watchers, like Charlie Cook of the Cook Report. He's giving me, rattling off a number of things that, truisms about what's going to happen in 2018, and I have to say, hold on, why did you believe anything you're saying any longer? We saw all of that blow up in 2016. But yeah, I wish that we could cover a wider swath of the audience. I don't think it's quite as narrow as we might believe it is. I got a lot of folks would come up to me at Trump rallies and say, "I love you, Chris Matthews." So I mean, it's not. I don't think it's completely. I don't think it's so black and white. I hope not. I want to hope not.
Hi, thank you. This has been great. My question goes back to when you were on the road with the Trump campaign and maybe witnessing some of the awful violence that took place during some of those rallies, and what that was like, and how you and the rest of the press pool felt, and what it was like on the ground rather than hearing it from you on TV or reading it in the paper.
I talk about this a lot in the book, and there's a few chapters where we talk about June and July, and that was when the violence was reaching its peak. It was hard to get. I mean, we saw a protester get sucker punched. The guy said afterwards, "Next time I see him, I'm going to kill him." We saw protesters get kicked. And they're protesting, so they're going to face a lot of angry people, but they were peacefully protesting. They weren't throwing punches themselves, for the most part. The anger level was intimidating. Especially, there was a rally in New Orleans in March where there were a number of Black Lives Matter protesters who just stood in the middle of the crowd and held their hands up and refused to move, just stood there like this. And there were people carrying Confederate flags. Sorry, getting me at the end of the week. My brain is catching up with my Confederate flags, Confederate flag T-shirts, and it was another one of those airport hangar rallies where the sound ricochets off the steel, and it got really intense. And somebody tripped or someone was pushed. I'm not quite sure, but the whole crowd kind of moved as one toward the press pen, and suddenly all the reporters were like, "These bicycle racks are really not that strong." And it just felt like in that moment the whole place could have turned into one giant brawl. And Donald Trump at that point got in extra private security to help work the room. But outside, there was a time when every city we'd go to, San Diego, South Bend, Indiana, there would be riot police there. South Bend, Indiana, there were riot police wherever we went because Donald Trump protesters were angry and Donald Trump supporters were angry, and they were happy to get into a fight when they walked out. This gentleman's had his hand up.
So, Donald Trump, crazy or crazy like a fox?
I'm not going to answer that question.
So I was particularly frustrated and angry with network reporting, network news during the campaign, even today. Not only with Trump supporters, but others, in that staging attacks by Trump of biased news. I felt the networks were going overboard to appear to be fair to him or his surrogates or to other politicians when they knew the guy was just lying to their face. I mean, sometimes, or lately, maybe the word falsehood would start to creep in, but,
I can explain that to you.
okay. Am I fair in thinking that?
I understand why you're thinking that. The thing about the word lie is that there's a very high bar for us to use that word because it is somebody's intent. And it's very hard for us to figure out a person's intent because we're not inside their head. So that is a word that we don't use. But it changed during this campaign. The New York Times called him a liar. That had never happened before. I mean, that was a huge moment. And the reason we were able to cross that threshold is because we would correct him to his face all the time, and other people would, and there were facts that bore our fact-checking out, and he still said the same thing. So at some point, you just have to call it what it was, which is a lie. He kept saying that he was always against the war in Iraq. We had him on camera, or on tape, saying, yeah, go ahead. He talked about Muslims cheering in the streets of Jersey City. That did not happen. We gave him the generosity of saying, do you think maybe you're confusing what you saw in the Gaza Strip? Generally, because if you look back and maybe you saw a bunch of news footage, it's a blurry time, it's a stressful time, maybe you just confused what you saw in the Gaza Strip with what you think might have happened in Jersey City. Maybe you read a news report of one person doing something in Jersey City and those just compounded. No, he wouldn't back down from it, and he would even offer, I'll give you the footage and the clippings, I have them. But we never got it. So there were thresholds where you could use that word. Reporters don't like to be a part of the story. And we also don't think navel gazing is all that helpful. We do this too much now, where we get on the air and we talk about his attacks on the press, and we talk about the First Amendment. And I feel like even now, we should talk about ourselves less, and we should talk more about the policies and the people and what's going on. It's trying to find a balance, because in one sense, it is an attack on the Constitution, and in another sense, it's an easy way for him to just get us talking about ourselves, and I don't think that's helpful for the dialogue. I understand where you're coming from.
Thank you so much.